to Ukraine, believe and pray.
All right, it gives me a great honor to introduce our next person, our next speaker, our keynote, Pitch Johnson. So Franklin Pitcher Johnson co-founded Draper and Johnson Investment Company in 1962. A couple of months ago, I wrote an article for TechCrunch with a short history of Silicon Valley, and this is one of the original VC firms that built this ecosystem. He started Asset Management Company in 1965. Asset Management Company has made over 250 venture investments in its 47-year history, including Amgen, Sierra Semiconductor, Tandem Computer, Teradyne, Verity. He's a past director of the National Venture Capital Association, a past president of the Western Association of Venture Capitalists, and was a trustee of the Foothill De Anza Community College District for 12 years. He taught a class on entrepreneurship and venture capital at Stanford Graduate School for over 12 years. He's still an active member of faculty at Stanford. He has served as an advisor to several Eastern European countries since 1990 in the area of entrepreneurship and privatization, and has helped form venture funds there. He's active in education and cultural affairs, and served as chairman of the board of the San Francisco Opera from 1999 to 2008. He's the lead limited partner of Asset Management Ventures and is active in managing his family office and foundation. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from Stanford and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Please, big round of applause for Pitch Johnson.
What he was trying to say, I'm an old guy. I've been doing this since 1962, and I've learned a couple of things. One, I want to divide what I'm going to say into two parts. One part is political. I can't avoid that, talking to Ukrainians. And the second one I want to talk about has to do with entrepreneurship. These able gentlemen before me have talked about the details of what they do, but I want to talk about that in general. But I want to talk some history of a visit I made to Ukraine, to Kiev, in 2008. I have been to Russia 22 times after 1990, and you can imagine the changes I've seen. Last summer I was there for the World Championships of track and field, opened by Vladimir Putin, a long talk, to put it mildly. I hadn't really been to Ukraine very much except for the family visit way back in 1972. We had a group, there's two impressions I'm going to talk about, and the political aspects. One is, of course, one more opinion about Vladimir Putin, which you need, I know. And then I want to talk about the visit. But in the time I've been going to Russia, I helped start a venture capital firm there in then Leningrad, and then later St. Petersburg again. I watched the rise and fall of a couple of leaders, and of course watched Putin come into power. And I can't take time to give the talk I gave in March 27th, just after the Crimean problem came up. But I will just say this, just to assert what I think. And I base this on conversations with dozens of Russian friends. By the way, I thought ENCO was a Ukrainian ending. It's a Russian-Ukrainian ending because there's nobody here named ENCO. Any ENCOs? Oh, one ENCO, see, just one ENCO. But when I am in Russia, I'm always assuming that a guy or a woman named ENCO is Russian-speaking Ukraine. I just from Ukraine. Anyway, I would like to just say that the impression that I got after 22 visits over all those years to Russia, and watching Putin rise, and then especially last summer, I think that much of Putin's motives, his desire, is to stay in office. And it's not simple ego. Everybody I know in Russia thinks Putin is making tons of money as the president of Russia. You are not shocked by this information, I know very well. But when you look at what Putin's doing, when you look at what Putin, why don't I say Vladimir Putin, just to show respect for the president of another country. What Vladimir Putin is doing is trying to, and he has succeeded in being far more popular than he was last summer when I was there. He had popularity ratings of 38 or 40%, and now it's up at 60%. And he has instilled pride in a lot of Russian people. Now, the guys I know and women I know are entrepreneurs or related to entrepreneurs or bankers, and they were down on him last summer, not too enthusiastic. But the economy was terrible. They felt that the things Putin was doing to grow the economy were not strong. So that when I read about Vladimir Putin in the paper, when I read about his one move or the next, I'm very conscious of the fact that 2016 is the next election. Now, what does an election mean in Russia? You can tell me. But it's a selection by some means of the next president of Russia. And Putin wants to stay in power a lot. Now, all leaders do this, but I think, based on my many conversations with people, and I have knowledgeable friends who are patriots, who just simply think that his major motive, or a major motive, is simply because he's making tons of money in his job. There have been leaders of countries that I'm sure did that, but he is combining a desire to be, he's combining the wishes of the Russian people to be important again, as they felt. It's a great country and has been for centuries, but it's never really had what we dream of, and I hope you are too, and I know you are, is having a democratic society with freedom of speech and freedom of action. Now, the reason I brought that up is that you have to, and with all the troubles in eastern Ukraine, some kind of a deal is going to have to be, will be made with Putin, and apparently they've announced, although they're not implementing, the semi-independence of eastern Ukraine. So but you are people, just about everyone here is Ukrainian. You are looking for a chance to build your businesses, and I think it's going to be tough to think of Ukraine as a total country, so I would just suggest that you're going to have to concentrate on the classical Ukraine. And I'm going to talk about that. Only thing I want to say more political is I had a visit in 2008. A group I belong to advises the government of the United States, or the military, I should say, on economic matters. And we took a trip to Georgia, which I just had. It's the South Ossetian War go on, just a month before we were there. We went to Armenia, a sad place, may I say. Azerbaijan, and all they could talk about is that part of Azerbaijan which is occupied by the Armenians. And then we flew up to Kiev, and we met with our group, met with the general staff of the army, many of whom were old Soviet officers, because they were young officers. And I talked to a couple of the junior officers there. And then we met with the Minister of the Economy just the next day and talked about how they finance young companies how young companies are financed in Ukraine. So I don't know if the Ministry, I know the President of Russia is, President Poroshenko, is a former economics minister. I don't know whether I don't think he was that far back. But one thing happened that, as a small businessman will amuse you, I was talking English, of course, and every meeting we had was in Ukrainian with the General Staff, with the Minister of Defense, and with other people. But they were using Ukrainian and not Russian, which is the language of the country. But I assumed at least somebody would say something in Russian. It just didn't happen. Of course, that was demonstrating the independence of Ukraine from Russia. However, I said, Mr. Secretary, to Mr. Minister, what form of financing do young companies typically use in Ukraine? And I said, do they use equity? And the interpreter said, what is equity? I knew I was in trouble right there, because it was just, this is a long time ago, long before many of you started your businesses. But I realized how the gap between what I always assume is what happens and what other people are thinking about, but they were thinking of government loans, apparently. But when I said to the minister, well, equity is the investment in companies, and you own a part of the company in return for your investment. So it turned, of course, they turned out they understood that. It just was that word got the interpreter very, caught him short. The other thing that happened during that visit that would be interesting to you, I think, is some of the people talked about NATO. They wanted, and every nation except Armenia on our trip wanted to talk about joining NATO, and the military officials with us simply explained that wasn't likely to happen for obvious reasons, especially Section 5 of NATO, which is mutual defense. Only reason I bring that up is, to me, it was an insight. My only visit before that had been a family visit with the usual driving through the countryside. But the acquaintance of a person who just thought of Russia and Ukraine as kind of part of it, it was part of the Soviet Union, it was an eye-opener as to the independence and the desire for independence of Ukraine as a country. So anyway, that's all I'd want to say about politics, but it looks like Ukraine is on a very good pathway for being independent. The eastern, in eastern part, of course, we know is going to have some kind of a standalone status. But the things I'd like to talk now about, what 4 or 5 things that I think you should try to influence your government to have conditions that can enable you to start businesses. First of all, and some of these are going to be true. In fact, some of them have been mentioned already this afternoon. But it's very important that there be minimum regulations for starting a business. It's got to be easy from a regulatory point of view to start a business. And it's relatively easy in the United States. It could be easier, but you can get the permits to start a business, one from the state and usually one from your town. It doesn't require any federal permit anyway. But that's an important one, and you know better than I what you have to do in your hometown to start a business, but it's got to be kept to a minimum. I think there need to be low taxes on founders of companies and small businesses. People will put money preferentially into the risky business of small businesses if they believe that they can do better with that kind of investment and it'd be taxed lower than other kinds of investment. So capital gains taxes need to be kept low for small businesses and for the founders and the investors. A pool of talent and knowledge is very important too. That is, I call it a pool of talent and knowledge. You just have to have the people. This room is full of people who are now starting businesses, going to start business, or have started businesses. But the pool of knowledge, the universities have to provide, and research efforts and education have to be strong in any country for it to have the kind of future that's been described here. The other gentleman talked about it being, the data sciences being Ukraine's biggest industry in some time in the future. That would be great. I don't know, I can't comment on that except it's one person's faith. But for instance, I read about the Brain Basket Foundation. That kind of thing where where people are trained in business. One thing that's always a problem, and mostly in Eastern Europe, is people think of products before they think of markets. Now, some of these gentlemen that spoke before me have talked about markets a lot, but as is, it is important, it is vital that when you think about starting a company, and even if you have started a company and have clever technical ideas, that those technical ideas are useful to some customers that you can name, that you can spot. Another characteristic of any country, Western or Eastern, is to have a supply of capital, venture capital and bank lending. I don't know very well what organized venture capital there is in Ukraine. I didn't hear about any when I was there. I haven't read about any lately. But if you can get the government to, and I do think there's a role of government here, to encourage venture capital. And how can it encourage venture capital? One thing it can do, if a group of investors will put up so much money at greater risk, the government can put money in behind them. That is, put the investors are at greater risk, but the government can make venture capital companies bigger by risking money alongside of them, but behind them, so that, let's say I don't know what, I don't want to talk in dollars, but let's say somebody's guys will put up $10 million. The government could have some kind of a program, and I'm a very independent person of government, but they can get the government to put money alongside, and we had a program here called SBIC, Small Business Investment Company. In the Small Business Investment Company program, still true, you could put in those days $300,000, and the government would lend you up to 4 times that. And this is 1962, I might say, so don't take these numbers, but it worked. And if you lost your money, you lost your money first, and then the government lost their money second. But on the other hand, they lent you money, and they didn't get any equity feature, and that's been changed. But I just want to suggest that the government does have a role in enabling private people to build the size of their venture capital firms so that they can do more deals. And of course, I did mention the Brain Basket Foundation, but that's in a previous subject. And there has to be a supply of people who can provide professional support. You need accountants and lawyers. I hate to say you need lawyers, but you do. And you have to have a bunch of professionals can help you form companies, help you form accounting, and that kind of thing. And one problem I can see from your presence here, entrepreneurs have to be appreciated by the society. You want some mother to say, my son's an entrepreneur, or my daughter's an entrepreneur. And it took a while in the United States for that to be a decent profession. It took a while in Germany to have the ability to fail. One part of entrepreneurship is the possibility of failure and the possibility that your reputation can be ruined for life. We people in Silicon Valley, which eventually, it's not okay to fail, but you can recover from failure, you can learn from the failure, and move on to the next thing in your life. So this appreciation of entrepreneurs is now getting widespread, and so it isn't much of a problem, but still it's I don't know, I haven't visited in several years, but the fact that so many of you are entrepreneurs and want to form companies makes me think that's not a problem. So I want to talk just a few more minutes, again, and not the specifics that they were very ably described earlier this evening, but I want to say it again that companies are started to serve markets, and they're started to serve markets with products. And the products are not the first thought. They're the realization that there's a requirement for what you need. Another area, if you can't always do so, try to plan your financing requirements well ahead of time. And this is violated, but I think it's a good idea of forming a business plan, written down if possible, or at least in presentation, but have it organized so you know what markets you're going to serve, with what products and how you're going to design them, what people you need, and then the actual action of production, marketing, and sales, and then a cash flow. It's worth it to take the trouble to do all that detailed stuff, because you're more likely to succeed if you have a plan than if you just launch a happy product in a happy market. Because you want to have an outcome, and the point of the company is to succeed. I want to mention, too, that a lot of the success of your company will depend on your enthusiasm. We've heard that enthusiasm tonight. I call it beyond the rational part, beyond the part that means the business plan. You've got to bring enthusiasm to the, I call it zeal. I don't know, many of you all know that English word, but I love it. It means that you just have desire, very strong desire to succeed. And making money personally is, of course, the objective of the company, but it's not. It's the result of a successful company, and that's not what you're doing. You're trying to build a company to serve a market, to build a successful company, and that will result, of course, in personal gain. But it is the objective is to build a great company. And one time when I was teaching my class at Stanford, Bill Hewlett, the founder of Hewlett-Packard, was a good friend. Again, speaking of my age. And I asked him to come talk to the class. So he came into my house, and most of the class showed up. And one of the students asked him, "Did you realize, were you trying to get as wealthy as you are when you started Hewlett-Packard?" And Bill Hewlett gave a terrific answer. He said, "We were setting out to build a great company. We wanted to build the best company that could be for employees, for our customers, and for our shareholders. But we didn't, it wasn't for personal wealth." They made all kinds of money naturally. But I was really glad he said that to the students, because you need to build a great company. It doesn't have to be a big company, it just has to be a very good company. And if you do build a very good company with good products and serving the market well, then the personal wealth can result from that. But that's the general. The political statements are our opinions, but these last few things, I've just experienced them for 52 years now of doing this, and those principles, even though they're general and not specifically helpful to any one company, I think are probably the way I see the essence of entrepreneurship. So with that, I thought I was deliberately given some time for questions by our, anybody like to ask a question? Yes, sir.
I was, I'm living in the US for the last 23 years, and actually, I was a founder of a startup from 1996 to 2001, and I also was in several startups. And what I observed that after around 1997, when rise of Netscape, the essence of venture capital investment in the US changed a lot. So before it was very conservative in small investment, and after this suddenly one VC said that two people come to me with some pieces of paper and say that they have a valuation of $20 million. And after this, there was another crash of 2001, and everything changed again. And after this, VC started to invest much larger amount of money into deals where before only investment bankers invest. So this means that during just 20 years, what we mean by VC changed 2 times. So what is your comment about it? Are VCs the same as VCs in 60s, 70s, 80s? What is constant and what is different and what will be in the future? Maybe all VCs become investment
I really
bankers.
appreciate that question because some things are constant. And what I have described in the way you organize and you make your business go, those are constant. Those principles that I talked about are good in 1962 and they're good now. But what's changed is the way you get companies financed. Now, I can talk about the area around here, but there was very little money around. People didn't have much money. There weren't individual investors. You had to raise some money, or Bill Draper, my partner, and I scraped up a little bit from savings and borrowed from the government and did that SBIC program. And just leap to the present, because we can't go through all the stages in between, but gradually, when venture capital companies made a little money, they then attracted the attention of Wall Street. And so organized money came into the business, and that was only after really I got started. But then venture capital firms became big money management firms, and they got big fees, they made good money, and they made profits for their investors. But now the thing that's different really right now is in Silicon Valley is there's a lot of people who have made a lot of money. Not the big billionaires you read about, but guys and women have made 5 million, 10 million by being in old startups. There's lots and lots of people with real money. I mean, a few $1 million, and they love to they help to invest in other people's companies. So startups especially are financed by other individuals more than they ever have been in the past. The venture capital firms are still working, but not so much on startups now. We have a small venture capital, a private venture capital firm that does only startups. I might correct the interlocutor. I'm not the partner of Asset Management Ventures. That's run by some guys in our office, but it's my office and my dough. So it still is me. But the way companies get started now, very often, sometimes they go to venture firms, but very often, we call them angels. Why they picked that word for them, I do not know. But angel financing is very common now, and people go to their friend. Instead of going to your uncle for $50,000, you now go to your buddy down the street for a couple of $1 million to get your company started. But venture capitalists do big startups, and some people might think that it's too much money going into young companies, but the data sciences have produced such big markets that it is attracting a lot of venture capital even at the beginning with big capitalizations to start with. So from little or no money, then Wall Street comes in, and now the fundamental startup capital is coming from individuals.
My name is Lawrence. I'm from Wabbit. What are your thoughts?
From where?
Wabbit. It's a startup. So for an early stage startup with a young team, what are your thoughts? Raising an angel round now, or going to an accelerator?
Or going to a what?
Accelerator, as opposed to raising an angel round.
Well,
business incubator or accelerator, like
Oh,
Y
I see,
Combinator,
yeah.
like 500 startups.
Really, you're talking about doing it in Ukraine?
No, in Silicon Valley.
Oh, in Silicon Valley. Well, I do understand that. There are certain venture firms who specialize in startups, and there tend to be smaller ones, but some big venture firms have a section of them which devotes itself to venture capital. But you have to get the names. Maybe you don't know any, but there are organized groups of angels, bands of angels. There's one called Band of Angels, actually. And I call the leader of it the Archangel, but they don't think that's funny. Then pick some of the venture firms that you can find who do startups. There's a number of them. There's a number of them. I can't name all those guys, but I'll give you my
Maybe-
card
maybe you can
after
help
the meeting.
clarify the question a little bit. He was asking angels versus going to an accelerator program. What would you say your advice, one way or the other?
Well, oh, you mean the municipal, I mean, like the accelerator programs that are started by towns?
More like the accelerator programs like Y Combinator, 500 Startups, Techstars.
Oh, Y Combinator, yeah. Oh, I didn't get that part of the question. Yeah, there's several accelerators around, and they can give you a place to start, a place to live, I mean, a place to have your lab, and incubator is another name for those, and there's several of those around. I'm sorry I didn't understand your question. Thank you. It just depends how independent you feel. It depends, do you feel that you and your group have the marketing and skills to start a company, or do you need advice every day on the spot from somebody? I would say Y Combinator is a very powerful, very good group of people. And not only do you get help, but you get some place to form your company. Skolkovo is trying to do a little bit like that, actually, in other countries that we know about. I think it's a question of your own total capabilities rather than one being better than the other for everybody. But it is a definite alternative to consider.
Pitch. Over here. Hi.
Yes.
Burton Lee, Stanford Engineering. 2 weeks ago, I was at a reception for a certain Central Eastern European country where they had a group of, a table of brochures of startups from that country. Several of the companies, they all had their equity structure broken out. And most of the companies, the founder had like 85%. The next person on the management team, CTO, had 1 or 2%. So this is a problem here in the Valley because you can't come here without the management team being really fully engaged on the equity side. This is a big problem out of Eastern Europe and other parts of Europe. What do you as a Silicon Valley investor say to these founders when you see an equity structure like that that doesn't provide sufficient incentives to the rest of the management
We don't
team?
see many structures like that. I mean, we would just say that's simply inadequate to pull your team together. It's okay for the founder to have 2 or 3 times as much as the others, and if he or she has worked for years to get a loan to get it going, but it's still, you have to want the other people to come with you and stay. So we wouldn't do a deal that had a structure like that. What part of engineering are you in? Well, I'm a Stanford Mechanical. I even understand, no, I never understood thermodynamics. No, I won't say I did.
All right, one last question. You better make it good.